The Last Word with Stan Collymore.
Stan Collymore! Oh, yes!
Telling it as it is.
Instead of tweeting and putting on Instagram that Collymore's this and Collymore's that, come and tell us.
No holes barred.
Go on, Stan! Look at it!
Pure, unadulterated Collymore.
And Stan Collymore strikes.
A happy Tuesday to one and all, and a very warm welcome to The Last Word with me, Stan Collymore. I'm flying solo today, but don't worry, apparently I've done it once or twice before. Every week we take a look back at the main talking points in the Premier League weekend. We bring you the biggest interviews with the giants of the game like Jurgen Klopp, Jamie Carragher, Sol Campbell, and today Gary Neville.
They've gone back to what has worked for them historically, but should they have ever moved away from it? Should they have stuck with Van Gaal and said, no, we believe in this new route? Should they have stuck with Jose? What they seem to have done is essentially got to a roundabout, gone down one sort of pathway, then thought, I don't like that, come back to the roundabout again, then gone down another.
Finishing off with the news from around Planet Football. This is The Last Word with Stan Collymore. Are you ready? Come on!
The Last Word with Stan Collymore.
A few years ago, the EU banned a very harmful and aggressive substance called methyl chloride, which is the main ingredient in paint strippers. All painters and decorators know this is harmful. It irritates the skin and the eyes. So with this being banned, it left the painting and decorating industry without an effective replacement. Not for long. CT1, who always led the way in R&D, that's research and development to you and me, introduced the latest tech in paint removal, and it's called Peel Tech. Peel Tech removes paint fast and easy from all surfaces, and it isn't harmful. It peels the paint away within minutes. So, as it's the last few weeks of summer, if you're finishing off those DIY jobs around the house and garden, use Peel Tech. It removes paint, it removes rust, it removes graffiti, it removes Get Lost Collymore off The Last Word with Stan Collymore from the side of your house. Peel Tech from CT1.
The Last Word with Stan Collymore.
You're listening to The Last Word with Stan Collymore, available to download every week across every podcast provider. Tell your friends and join the revolution. Fantastic reaction to this podcast. You know, there are some very big ones out there. The cricket is very big at the minute. Wonderful that England are back in the Ashes. But in the podcast charts, we're even above some of the old classics like Test Match Special podcast and Tail Enders and what have you. So we're very, very chuffed that we've got your ears. We've got a great interview with Gary Neville coming up. We've got 10-15 minutes of him today and then the full 45-minute hit for you on Friday because the interview was so good. It's absolutely blown up on social media. He was very candid. He was very honest. He was very straight. I want to be straight with you. This for me is a massive opportunity to just be who I am as a broadcaster. Some of you don't like people that are blunt, that are very opinionated. Some of you love it. And that's the way I prefer to be. I'm sick and tired of watching television shows where it was like, yeah, it was a game of two halves and he was very good. Or analyst shows where there's lots of squiggles and lots of lines that confuse and bamboozle. We like to give you 45 minutes, 50 minutes, an hour of quality analysis. So, of course, what's going to be the big story through the season? VAR. Its implementation. It was always going to be Marmite. It was always going to be, some people were going to say, oh, it's football. If you can't do it on Hackney Marshes, then why should you do it in the Premier League? I fully understand that. I'm very much a traditionalist at heart. I played at every level of football from Sunday morning, Cannock Chase Division 7, not Division 1, Division 7, to the Premier League, a little spell in La Liga, a little spell with my nation, England, the Championship. So I think I know what I'm talking about. So when it comes to this next story, I saw an explosion on Twitter. David Silva, I was in Malaysia, I've just got back. Had a fantastic 4 days there doing punditry alongside Nigel Reo-Coker. Watch out for him, by the way. He's going to be an absolutely top draw pundit. Spoke very well. And Gary Stevens, the one that used to play for Tottenham, he lives out in Asia now. And so, of course, you're covering 3 games a day and you're analysing them properly and you get to stop and start and see the world feed and see everything that referees and assistant referees and Stockley Park, VAR people see. So, the big story this week is David Silva not given a penalty for Manchester City against Bournemouth and Harry Kane not given a penalty against Newcastle United. There's no coincidence here, folks. None at all. If you think about it, these are arguably, well, Harry Kane is the poster boy for English football. World Cup Golden Boot winner, line leader for England, England's number 9, etc., etc. At White Hart Lane, at home, not given a penalty. We'll come to that in a second. David Silva, 400th game for Manchester City. El Magico, the magician, universally loved by football fans for his professionalism, for his length of time at Manchester City, for his ability on the ball in tight areas, for his assists. So for VAR, a man, in other words, watching a screen in Stockley Park after the referees deferred both situations to Stockley Park, you would have been forgiven for thinking they've said, hey, don't make any issue with these two guys. Don't even suggest that these weren't penalties. There must be. They're two of the grand dams of the Premier League. No. Both incidents, both on the same match day, were no penalty. So let's ask why. Many fans said, Stan, you're talking cobblers. It was a stonewall penalty. Contact does not mean a penalty. I'll repeat it. Contact does not mean a penalty. It's a contact sport. If there was a penalty or a free kick for every single time two players touched each other, we would have no game. So let's come to David Silva. He drives into the box. Yes, a defender catches him on the foot. But for me, it's been very simple for many years. If you knock somebody and it stops them from doing what they're trying to do, in other words, for David Silva to get a shot off, penalty. If he just catches you but you can continue on your way, no penalty. And actually, when it was deferred to VAR and Stockley Park, that's the decision that was made. The referees looked back 3, 4, 5, 6 times with a bank of guys around him and said, basically, did David Silva go down quickly, easily? And the answer was yes. And so I was jumping up and down in the studio saying, yes, come on, at last. The game is fighting back. So let's go to Harry Kane. He's in a situation with Jamal Lascelles, shoulder to shoulder. Lascelles knows he can't get to the ball. So Harry Kane, and I know because I've been in that position, cannot chase Division 7 to the Premier League, to La Liga, to the England international team, where I actually got a bollocking by Terry Venables against Brazil for not going down in the box. And I didn't, and I proudly didn't, and this is why it's important to me, is that Harry Kane, instead of taking the ball slightly to his right and getting the shot off and scoring the goal, in other words, treating us consumers, fans, to one of his specialities, goal scoring, he slowed down, he planted his foot, he leaned into Jamal Lascelles, which in itself should tell you was ridiculous. He leans into him and he goes down. It goes to VAR, and I thought, in the studio, Nigel Reo-Coker and Gary Stevens said, that's a pen, Stan. Everybody on Twitter, every journalist that's not played a meaningful game of Sunday football knew it was a penalty. But I'm telling you, as a professional footballer, as a professional striker, as an amateur striker that's been in that position many times, I'm telling you it's more difficult to go down in that set of circumstances than it is to stay on your feet. So we wait in the studio a minute. 90 seconds later, no penalty. And again, I jump up and I'm whooping and hollering. 2 decisions on the same day. And I think this is VAR, this is the rule makers that are basically turning around and saying, we've had enough. We're not going to call out cheaters and divers. We're not going to get into people suing us for calling a player a cheat. We're just not going to give it as a penalty. I say the big story of the week, VAR, Harry Kane, David Silva got it absolutely spot on.
Stan Collymore.
Right, before we go into an analytical and pundit and opinion view of the weekend's games, a question that basically struck out to me was this week, is the academy system in England now starting to churn out quality? Is the academy system across Europe starting to churn out quality? Of course, we pumped lots and lots of money into the academy system and we only saw Chelsea having a glut of young players that then were loaned out to Vitesse Arnhem or to clubs in Belgium, France, Italy, Germany. Max Aaron's Norwich City, lot of promise. Ben Godfrey, his central defensive colleague, learning by the week in the Premier League. Todd Cantwell scores a goal, backing up Pookie, Timo Pookie Party at Norwich City. Tammy Abraham, 2 goals. I've questioned him. Does he have the ability to score goals in the Premier League? Yes, he does. Harry Wilson, what about that for a free kick for Bournemouth against Manchester City? Mason Mount, a goal again at Norwich City. James Maddison, assist. Technically gifted, positive, and now getting opportunities. So I think that we all should be very happy that instead of these players being given great coaching, given great food, being taught to cook as they were at Chelsea and a lot of the... But trust me, at academies, they're taught general life skills, wonderful. But you know what? I want to see them be very good footballers, not on MasterChef in the next 5 or 6 years. So instead of these players going to 18 years of age, winning an FA Youth Cup, winning the UEFA Champions League Youth Cup, and then being loaned out, as I said, to get them in somebody's first team is absolutely sensational. I do wonder, I have to say, is this the death of the journeyman pro? At the end of my career, I retired at 30, which isn't very old at all. But I was kind of pimped around. I went from Leicester City, which I really enjoyed under Martin O'Neill, to Bradford City. And really, I should have retired before then, probably before 30. I was done. I was shot. I was finished. But I wonder now, a Bradford City in the Premier League, a Leicester City, of course, who are in the Premier League, going for younger, hungrier players from their academies that have had a really good schooling, rather than a journeyman pro like me at the end of my career, is great to see. So Max Aarons, Ben Godfrey, Todd Cantwell, Tammy Abraham, Harry Wilson, Mason Mount and James Maddison, I take my cap off to you. The future is bright. The future is British.
The last word with Stan Collymore.
I feel like a little kid in a sweet shop. I get all the punditry duties to myself this week. No Hugh Wizzy, he's off. I'm sure enjoying himself yesterday at Notting Hill Carnival, the long bank holiday weekend. Sam Miller's been off watching NASW, Women's Premier League games in the United States. So it's down to me. And like I say, I think I've done it before. Let's start with Friday night football. The Babbies, Aston Villa versus Everton. Friday night football was back. The most played top flight fixture, the 202nd or might have been 203rd now, reiteration of this very old battle. Of course, both clubs founder members of the Football League. Another one, Bolton. I'll come to you in the news. Not happy at all. But it was Villa against Everton, 2-0 win. Wesley gets his first goal. I had a massive Twitter beef with Villa fans because I dared, after the first couple of games, to suggest that Wesley, and this is the truth, do you want the truth from somebody that's played in that position, or do you want everybody to say, oh, he was, let's ignore the first couple of games. In the third game, he was fantastic, so that means that he's now going to be up and running. No, the first couple of games against Tottenham Hotspur and against Bournemouth, Wesley as a central striker didn't hold the ball up. To cut a long story short, I sent a couple of the Villa players, get him on the training ground, get him working on this, get him working on that. And he looked a different player against Everton. Not saying it had anything to do with me, but I know for a fact that they would have taken him on the training ground and told him to use his physicality, which is immense, to be able to use the basics of striking play to hold the ball up and bring other people into play. Villa were much more direct. They're much more aggressive than in the first couple of games. But Villa fans, some Villa fans don't like me at all. They think I'm not even a Villa fan. And that is their right. But there's no doubt in my mind that if Wesley you're going to get the best out of, you need to be able to use his physical attributes. A first big win for Aston Villa in the Premier League. I do have to say that the atmosphere at Villa Park is as loud as I've heard it in the Premier League for a long time, and the longest the best since I played against Atletico Madrid in the UEFA Cup quarter-final, which was absolutely rocking that night. Where do Everton fit into this? Well, Everton have actually kept a couple of clean sheets in their first couple of games. They did have plenty of opportunities, and I don't think there's anything too much to criticise and be over the top about. They had the lion's share of possession at Villa Park. They had the vast majority of chances. They hit the post. I thought that overall they looked a decent outfit, and on another day they could have walked away with at least a point, which would have meant, a good away point at Aston Villa is always a good point. Doesn't matter where Villa are in the league or where they are in a season. As it was, Villa kept a clean sheet, which is big for them. I'm a massive fan of Tyrone Mings and Bjorn Engels as a pairing. I think that they're going to get stronger and stronger, which is very important for Aston Villa. Villa 2, Everton 0. Now, Norwich City versus Chelsea, that can only mean one thing.
Where are you? Let's be having you!
I love you, Delia, so much. I love the fact that Norwich City have a club that has Delia Smith, one of the great chefs, cooks, and Stephen Fry, one of the great sort of orators, as part of their football club. How fantastic is that? And of course, for you little stat fans, on the ball City, never mind the danger. People will say that at the end is actually Southwest rather than Norwich, but you get the vibe. Is the oldest continually sung football song in existence. If you disagree and you've got an older one and your football club, tweet me at Stan Collymore. Winless in the last 11 now versus Chelsea. Frank Lampard's first win. The future is bright, as we've already alluded to. Tammy Abraham and Mason Mount. Tammy Abraham at the double. Let's go into him first. At Villa, last season on loan, I thought he was very good. But my criticisms of him are that for his height, he's not a great line leader. If you think of Romelu Lukaku when he first came into the English game, he wasn't wiry by any means, but he wasn't the beast that he is now. A lot of people say, "Oh, he's huge now. He's even overweight." Stan, no, it's muscle. It's working on weight. It's training every day. It's just getting bigger. I want to see a bit more meat on Tammy Abraham's bones, because I think that the Premier League is a physical league. We've talked about Wesley. Aston Villa will come to Joel Linton for Newcastle United. But that will get him off and running. 2 goals, 2 good finishes. I think that now he can settle down and concentrate on working on outside the box, having players, whether it be William, whether it be Pedro, whether it be Mason Mount. He's going to get lots of opportunities to play with his back to goal. He's going to get lots of opportunities to make little darting runs, and he's going to get lots of chances. So a big thumbs up to Tammy Abraham. Mason Mount. What can you say about this young kid? He will be, I'm sure. I'll be surprised if he's not in the England squad. Gareth Southgate might say, well, let's keep him with the underage groups for now, and let's not big him up too much. But Gareth Southgate is also a big fan of players that are in form. I would put Mason Mount in because he offers, from the midfield area, dynamism. He runs with the ball. He's a very cool customer. He's a very good finisher. And again, he's played, he was in the top 10 players at Vitesse Arnhem on loan 2 years ago. In the same league, of course, that Matthias de Ligt played in. He was one of the players in the Championship last season when they got to a final and fell at the last hurdle for Derby County. Put Mason Mount in the England squad and he will not let you down. On the converse side, I still think with Norwich City, and I had a massive conversation with a mate of mine over the weekend, and they were saying, look, this is the way that we play. We're going to score lots of goals. And I keep coming back to the fact of, but you are going to keep conceding goals. Yes, but we've played the European champions, both of them, the Champions League final winners and the Europa League final winners. Makes no difference. If you, I guarantee you that Norwich will concede several times this season, whether it be by Crystal Palace. I think they may have Crystal Palace to come next, actually. No, Villa have got Crystal Palace next. But let's say Crystal Palace, let's say Bournemouth. All of those teams have the ability to be able to score 2s and 3s against you. And all of those teams, as the season goes on, are going to be scrapping to try and keep away from that drop zone. So it's not just about conceding 5 against Liverpool or conceding 3 against Chelsea. It's about getting things defensively right. They were very good last week against Newcastle United, a hapless Newcastle United last week, it has to be said. Not so good this week, although Timo Pukki is on fire. I was in Malaysia, a little story for you. Sit down with the producers and we're having a nice meal. It was a seafood curry. And all of the producers were very deferential. Stan Collymore, Liverpool, huge in Malaysia. Stan, we just need to be a little bit careful with Timo Pukki. I was like, right, okay, why? What's he doing? Do you know what Pukki means in Malaysia, Stan? I was like, no, actually, I don't know. It means... Okay, let's talk about Timo then, instead of Pukki. So Pookie trends in Malaysia every single week, not necessarily for his goal-scoring exploits. 5 in 3, though, now for Timo, the striker. Todd Cantwell as well. I mentioned him in the young players list. Dynamic, really rangy forward, likes to get in touching distance to his striker. Got in the box. Pookie with the assist. Cantwell drives at the near post. Look, I don't think Norwich City are going to get relegated, but my worry for Norwich City is, unless they get the defensive part right, that's down to young Max Aarons, young Lewis at left back, young Ben Godfrey, more of a veteran in Grant Hanley, and Tim Krul, of course. If they keep clean sheets, Norwich will stay up comfortably. And I said to my mate, why don't you want to stay up comfortably rather than go on this roller coaster ride that you're going to go on if you just play in the same way? One of us is going to be right. That was Norwich against Chelsea, 3-2 to the Blues. Let's go to the south coast of England and a south coast derby. Brighton against Southampton. Brighton have won 1 of the last 11 against the Saints. 14 now without scoring more than 1 at home. That's the big worry for me. They decided to go with Andone leading the line, a front 3, Graham Potter, a new manager. And he got all the big up about how good a coach he is, how good a proactive coach he is. But the concern for me is they're still not scoring goals at home. Glenn Murray was on the bench. I just wonder whether the manager, Graham Potter, will be going behind the scenes this week and just giving him a pat on the back, or whether he'll stick with Andone. But feelings, moods amongst players matter. They matter a lot. And when people say to me, well, you reel out these stats, Stan, and it says that Crystal Palace never won against Manchester United at Old Trafford. We'll come to that game. And Crystal Palace have won for the first time in 22 games against Palace. That your stats mean nothing. No, what it means is that there's a 1 in 22 chance of Crystal Palace beating Manchester United. There's a 1 in 14 chance now of Brighton and Hove Albion scoring more than 1 goal at home. Now, I'll suggest to you, I'm going to ask you the question and just give it some thought for a second. Do you think 1 goal is enough to win a Premier League game, any Premier League game? Brighton against Man United, Brighton against Aston Villa, Brighton against Bournemouth, Brighton against Newcastle? The answer is no. You need to be scoring at least a couple, and that's why so many clubs are investing heavily in attacking talent, playing with a front 3, and a dominant attacking midfield behind them. So for Brighton, that's a little bit of a concern for me. I would go back to Glenn Murray, put your arm round him, give him the big up, blow a bit of smoke up his backside and say, give this guy service and he will score goals, proven at this level. But they have to up the goal scoring rate down at the Amex Stadium. Southampton, the most unpredictable team in the Premier League, to be perfectly frank. It's very difficult to know what Ralph Hasenhüttl's men are going to do. It was very difficult to predict what many managers at Southampton were going to do, whether it be Koeman, whether it be Poch, whether it be Mark Hughes over the years. They are just an inconsistent side. I had them to finish 17th. I think that'll be about right. But that's a big, big win. Especially after 2 losses. They showed plenty of character, plenty of attacking nous as well. One of my favourite players in the league, Nathan Redmond, a local lad, Birmingham. I think a lot is going to fall on his shoulders, unfortunately, this year, which I don't think should be the case. I think that you should at least be able to defend and rely on 2, 3, 4 different outlets to be able to rely on if you are a Premier League strike force. And I think that when you look at the teams, let's have a little look here. I've just got both teams in front of me. So the front, Shea Adams, positive. Baldbury's not got his first goal up and running yet. Came from Birmingham City, of course. I think he's got promise. Danny Ings could have scored a winner against Liverpool recently, and obviously scored 1. Yes, they're a threat, but are Che Adams in his first season in the Premier League or Danny Ings going to get above 10 Premier League goals? Probably not. So that probably means James Ward-Prowse, huge for them this year. He has to be. And Nathan Redmond are going to come to the fore. So to see Redmond get a goal, I think is very important for Southampton, and it will stand them in good stead. But I still have them to struggle so far this season. So for Brighton, need to score more goals at home. For Southampton, Life is like a box of chocolates, as Forrest Gump once said. You just don't know what you're going to get. Manchester United, the self-proclaimed biggest club in the world. We're going to be hearing from a legend, a true Manchester United legend, won everything there is to win in Gary Neville. That's going to be coming up on the show. It's a must not listen. We're dropping 2 drops, 10-15 minutes of the best of today. And then on Friday, the full 45-minute interview as extra time, as a bonus for you, because the interview was that good. Tail of the tape going into the game. Unbeaten, the Red Devils, in their last 22 against Crystal Palace. Manchester United, 22 shots, 3 on target. Discuss, Mr. Collymore. I will. Nowhere near good enough. Nowhere near ruthless enough up top. In Anthony Martial and in Marcus Rashford, they have talent, but they remind me of juvenile talent. They remind me of under-18s talent. On a weekend when yet again Raheem Sterling has scored, and 2 years ago Raheem Sterling was being talked of as potential, but he's hit and miss, but he can't score enough goals, but his conversion rate isn't good enough. One-on-ones is not good enough. Now, you can go to the bank and say, Raheem Sterling, I'll have a fiver on him, and I almost guarantee he will score or assist. You cannot say that with Marcus Rashford. Marcus Rashford, was he spooked with the penalty? Missing a penalty, all the debate, all of the issues going around him, or Pogba? Yes, I'll probably suggest he was. He hadn't missed a penalty before that. Misses a penalty 3 days after it's the biggest story in world football. And Anthony Martial, he goes from moody little boy to being the real deal when he feels like it, but not this week. They should have put Crystal Palace to the sword. Benteke was dropped. Andros Townsend was dropped. They were lacking in confidence. They had lost their opening couple of games. Roy Hodgson looked a little bit clueless and dishevelled. And you knew that they were going to rock up to Crystal Palace, rock up to Old Trafford and do 2 things. Defend their own half and try and hit on the counter-attack. So what happens with the first goal for Crystal Palace? Punt up pitch, a flicked header, Harry Maguire, £80 million worth of defender doesn't cover round Lindelof. Ayew canters forward, scores a goal. You will not see an easier goal conceded on Hackney Marshes next week. So there's a major criticism about this Manchester United defence. Give them plaudits by all means when they beat Chelsea 4-0, but you have to critique them and critique them properly. That was schoolboy defending by Lindelof. It was schoolboy defending by Harry Maguire. But the real point for me is that I cannot trust Marcus Rashford nor Anthony Martial to deliver on a regular basis, and that's going to be a problem for Manchester United. They dominated the game. They dominated the stats. I have to say about Crystal Palace, I thought they were excellent. Benteke and Andros Townsend were dropped. Jeffrey Schlupp came in. I thought he was very good, worked very hard for the team. Jordan Ayew, I think that Wilfried Zaha, as rusty as he was last week, was good this week. So overall, Crystal Palace break that hoodoo against Manchester United. But this is where Manchester United are, Manchester United fans. Inconsistent, work in progress, and key players, particularly Martial and Rashford, need to step up to the plate and be more like Raheem Sterling. Smell the coffee, address the coffee, be consistent. Sheffield United against Leicester City. I think this was the first top flight meeting since 1976. I know it is, actually. Jamie Vardy, who else? A Wednesday fan. I love it when I used to, every single time, I'll tell you the story. Used to play against West Bromwich Albion a lot and always scored against them. And I remember particularly at their Brummie Road end that I scored, I think it was for Nottingham Forest, a brace. Scored for them for Villa, scored for them Fulham. Even Fulham, I was crap at Fulham, and I even scored against West Brom for Fulham at the Brummie Road end. And I would score, and I would, against any team to be fair, and I would give it to them. So I'd go to the away end and I'd give it the bird, I'd give it the finger, I'd fists in the air, and of course the fans are giving you the bird back. I'll post a couple of Twitter pictures later. There's a great one from West Brom. And West Brom fans, I'd just go up to them in the Brummie Road end and I'd just go, every effing time, in big, opening my mouth just to let them know. And there's a bloke on the door at West Brom in the media section. He's a mod. He thinks he's Paul Weller. He's got that kind of that Paul Weller sort of semi-mullet kind of thing going on. And every time that I would go to the Hawthorns as a broadcaster, I'd get to the door and he'd just look at me and go, all right, Stanley, every effing time. Every effing time. So for Jamie Vardy, I'm sure there's a bit of deja vu for Sheffield United fans, a Sheffield Wednesday fan rubbing their noses in it. Puts blades to the sword. You see what I did there? Chris Wilder, not happy in his post-match comments, and I think rightly so. I think that when you come into the league, you expect a certain amount of effort. It is the Premier League. And he said, I'm not, the supporters clapping the players off, great, for a bit of effort. That's not what we're here for. We're here to show quality. And that's what I like about Chris Wilder. He's not one of these kind of tub-thumping Englishmen that rolls his sleeves up and says, well, if you can't give me quality, give me effort. He says, give me quality. They play with 3 central defenders that love to overlap. We've extolled the virtues of what they can do. But I think he will be disappointed that against Leicester City, a good Leicester City side, that they didn't get the ball down, they didn't play through the lines, they didn't keep possession enough. And if you don't against Leicester City, and I'm going to throw in a little hand grenade here, I think Leicester City have the best front six, not the most talented, the most balanced front six in the Premier League. And I'll tell you why. At Chelsea in the second half, they tore them apart. So Yuri Tielemans, ball player, great vision, great awareness. Hamza Chowdhury, another player that's going to get thrown into the mix with England if he keeps going. All you look at the minute is a big afro, and you think, who's this lad? Where's he come from? Fantastic physique, really loves to trundle forward, very direct. Dennis Pratt, he's a grinder. Professional players would call him a grinder. He works around everybody else, nicking little bits, turnovers to be able to give to better players. Jamie Vardy, no-brainer, runs in behind. James Maddison, no-brainer, number 10. He will get dragged into the England squad. And Iosi Perez. Iosi Perez actually has been the most disappointing out the lot so far, but it's a new team and he's bedded in. But they have the balance of pace, directness, travelling with the ball, a through ball. They have the best balance in the Premier League. So for Sheffield United, I think that Chris Wilder will be disappointed that he knew the best way to win that game was to keep the ball, and they didn't anywhere near enough. For Leicester City, it's simple. Go and be the best of the rest. Go and win a trophy. If Leicester can win an FA Cup or a League Cup and finish 6th or 7th, that will be a magnificent season for them. So good win on away days. Lots of away wins, of course, in the Premier League this week. We'll round up shortly. Watford against West Ham, 3 defeats now for the Hornets. Making a mockery of my will they be the best of the rest. There's still 35 games to go, so the potential for them to be the best of the rest is still there. But they're looking a million miles away from the team that got to an FA Cup final. They're looking a million miles away from a team that possibly on the last day of the season against West Ham, if they'd have won, they weren't. Their eyes and their ears were elsewhere. Looking forward to that FA Cup final. Could have finished top 10. The midfield 3, Will Hughes, Tom Cleverley, Gerard Deulofeu, discuss. Cleverley, is he good enough now at this level to be able to drive them forward from midfield? Will Hughes, you heard me talk about the young English players that have taken significant steps towards superstardom. Will Hughes has been this guy. He's going to be the next big thing. He's going to be the next big thing. No, next season is going to be the next big thing. Will, I really think you're a top quality player. Now it starts to deliver week in and week out. And in Gerard Deulofeu, they've got a player that, if he's consistent, will create problems for anybody. But I think he was very disappointed. Who led the line this week? Andre Gray, another player I know, of course, because he's from the Midlands. But no Troy Deeney in the lineup. And I think that Troy Deeney, and I've said this for many years on radio too, is that he is such an important figure in a club that brings in managers left, right and centre, players left, right and centre. He's the glue that sticks everyone together. And I would love to see, and I'll perhaps come back to this in future shows, the win rate with Troy Deeney in the team, the graft rate, the kilometres covered with Troy Deeney in the team compared without. West Ham United, I thought that they are a sort of a poor man's version of Manchester United, throwing names at a team sheet, but I thought that they were very impressive. Sebastian Haller now with a brace, that's important. And again, we're starting to see all of the strikers getting off the mark, and we're now only on match day 3. I think that as a striker, when I used to go into a season, of course you want to hit the ground running, but once you get to 2, 3, 4 games, you're chasing it. You are really chasing it, because you think to yourself as a striker, you want to be scoring roughly. If you score in match day 1, you almost give yourself a break in match day 2. If you give yourself a mental and physical break going into match day 2, you're loose. So you might score again, and then on it goes. But when you start getting tight, haven't scored in match day 1, haven't scored in match day 2, haven't scored in match day 3, it starts to become a huge problem, and no more so than with strikers. So to see Haller get a brace, Aguero, Wesley, Joe Linton, Harry Kane all off the mark, Tammy Abraham off the mark, absolutely fantastic to see. So that's the first half of the Premier League review of match day 3. Liverpool v Arsenal, Bournemouth v Man City, Spurs v Newcastle, and Wolves versus Burnley coming up shortly. But next, the one and only Gary Neville. You will not want to miss this.
The last word.
CT1 is the number 1 sealant and adhesive in the UK. Their research and development department always looking for ways to make those trade and DIY jobs easier for you. As you may know, popular brands of paint removal were banned due to environmental issues. No problem for us at CT1. They've come up with an answer. It's called Peel Tech. In the past, paint strippers were quite aggressive. If you use them, you know, they'd burn your skin in many cases. The CT1 guys have developed an amazing solution to this problem. It doesn't burn, it just peels. Peels the paint away. That's Peel Tech from CT1.
The last word with Stan Collymore.
I am absolutely delighted to be joined by a man that we made our England debuts together. I only had 2 more caps after that. You had about 6,200 after it. Gary Neville joins us on the last word. Gary, great to see you. What are Manchester United at the moment, and what should they be moving forward?
Manchester United historically have always had values and principles around attacking play, entertaining play, wide wingers, wide players, giving an opportunity to young players, buying the best Premier League or international players that play in the Premier League. I mean, Manchester United, I think, tried to sign you at one point when you were sort of, if you like, you know, becoming a really talented striker at Nottingham Forest. They tried to sign Alan Shearer, Paul Gascoigne. They got Paul Ince, Roy Keane, Bruce, Pallister.
But underpinned with the class of 92, the 1937 having an academy prospect on the bench or in the matchday squad.
Always underpinned by young players who had the heart and soul of the club within them, but also the best international talent and foreign talent mixed in as well to bring that what would be different type of culture, spirit to the team. So that's been the 3 areas that Manchester United have always had, but underpinned by values of attacking play and entertaining play. What they've allowed to happen since Sir Alex Ferguson retired is that they've gone basically with the coach-led values. So Louis van Gaal's philosophy and model is outstanding and had been brilliant for 25 years, but it didn't suit Manchester United. But it was coach-led recruitment. Jose Mourinho always been more of a physical type player profile. Bailly, Lindelof, Lukaku, Ibrahimovic, Pogba, all very physical players, strong, powerful, Premier League historic type players that you would say Jose would want. You go back to David Moyes, he signed Juan Mata and Juan Fellaini. One's a technical 5'8" player and one's a 6'4" player that's direct. So what they've allowed over the last 8 years is basically the tail to wag the dog and the coach to come in and basically drive the philosophy and recruitment. What they've now gone back to, with Ole, who understands the historic principles and values of the club, is essentially emerging young British talent, James, Wan-Bissaka and Maguire. They've brought through Greenwood into the squad, McTominay, they've obviously got Rashford, Lingard. I mean, they started last week with 5 academy graduates on the pitch and 3 other English players. There was only Lindelof, Martial and De Gea that were actually international players. But the mix of that team was historically what Manchester United have been. So they've gone back to what has worked for them historically. But should they have ever moved away from it? Should they have stuck with Van Gaal and said, no, we believe in this new route? Should they have stuck with Jose? What they seem to have done is essentially got to a roundabout, gone down one sort of pathway, then thought, I don't like that, come back to the roundabout again, then gone down another.
Right, why was that allowed to happen? Because I'm looking at a guy, and I've always been very positive when I've spoken about you, in terms of great former players giving something back to the club. Edwin van der Sar, that you know very well, Ajax, I go over to Brian Roy, a good friend of mine. I go over once a year, and you go into the Ajax de Toekomst Academy, and their philosophy is, you train here as a young kid, you learn here as a young kid, you do well for Ajax, we sell you, but someday you are going to come back and help this club.
Yeah.
I detect from you that there is frustration, and from a lot of Manchester United legends, that the club just literally a stone's throw away, haven't knocked your door and asked you to be a part of the process.
No, to be honest,
if they haven't, why aren't you frustrated? Because I would be in your position.
I'm frustrated as a fan with what's happened in the last 8 years, but not from a point of view of not getting the call to come and be part of the club. I'm more frustrated with the fact that they haven't had the courage or the convictions to stick with the plan that they've actually created themselves. So if what's happened is essentially Sir Alex Ferguson, Manchester United never had a foreign coach, ever. So they appointed after Sir Alex Ferguson what would be a British coach who'd had a good solid Premier League career, just like they did with Sir Alex Ferguson in Scotland. They had an outstanding Scottish career. They'd done with Ron Atkinson, Dave Sexton. They'd appointed a coach that fit the mould of what Manchester United historically had appointed. Because it went so badly, they thought, we can't do it like this anymore. We have to be a modern club. We have to change. We have to appoint an international coach, and we have to appoint the best coach possible. So they then went with Louis van Gaal, and for 2 years, Louis van Gaal instilled his culture, his way of playing into the club, but then realised, well, to be fair, this is not Premier League football. This is not Manchester United football. However, we're panicking a little bit here. We've thrown 400 million at it already. We need guaranteed success now, and Jose's the man to give us guaranteed success. Jose comes in, and then that doesn't work. They give him a contract 6 months before they actually sack him, which is incredible. And essentially, my frustration is with the fact that if you're a leader of a football club, you have to stick to what you do. You're the one who creates the plan. You're the one who appoints the manager. And it's like a football player. If it's not going well for you, as a striker, and you're not taking your chances, or what you try and do is persist with what served you well over many, many years, knowing that it will come good eventually because you're doing the right things. If you don't believe you're doing the right things and you all of a sudden start doing different things, you then just can't see the wood for the trees. You're on the waltzers spinning, and you essentially can't make a decision.
But isn't that where somebody at the football club, and I'm sure you're too modest to answer the question. I know, but Gary, I mean,
you've got Sir Bobby Charlton, Sir Alex Ferguson, David Gill. You've got that many people who understand the principles.
But if you're looking around Europe, though, it's like Bayern Munich's another club. I know you've spoken very positively about them, about how they've done things professionally over the years, and the team bus and the delivery of the team, very much an identity.
Yeah.
There doesn't seem to be any Barcelona, Pep Guardiola going through the system. Every club that rides the bumps of what professional football brings, new clubs, new money clubs like Man City and Chelsea coming in to be more competitive, rise of old giants like Liverpool, is that they've always drawn on the experience of the people that got them there in the first place.
Look, Stan, there's a number of things. First team performance should come at the heart of every decision made in a football club. First team performance. That is it. Now, that means if you're doing a commercial deal, if you're selling your tickets to fans, it's to create a better atmosphere so the team can win. If you're getting a commercial deal, it's so that you can get more money to support the team and ensure that we can be as competitive as possible. If you're building a training facility, it's so that you can have the best training facilities to encourage players to come, to give them the best environment for the team to win. So everything's got to be built around that, but also to create a perception. Manchester United own 40 acres around that ground there. This should be a Manchester United world. There should be a world of Manchester United. It should be a theme park. It should be residential. It should be commercial. It should be everything that sits within this area. The transport, you look over there, we're just looking out the window to the right, away from Old Trafford, and that's Media City. And what the developer has done over there is transformed essentially wasteland within Salford into something which is quite spectacular. Manchester United have an opportunity to go beyond football, education, opportunity, belief, employment, all the things that could happen. But essentially, everything should be coming back to making the first team better. I'll give you something extremely controversial that Manchester United fans might not like, but I'm going to say it. The Glazer family, and to be fair, I think for the correct reasons, have said that they'll never put naming rights on Old Trafford. The brand of Old Trafford is too big. I would sell the naming rights of Old Trafford if I was at Manchester United for 60, 70, 80 million a year. and invest every single penny of every. I would consult with fans whether they wanted it to happen, on the understanding that all of the money generated, that 800 million over 10 years, would mean that basically the whole of the Stretford end would be £10 or £12 to get in, and that a proportion of those tickets would go to young people.
So why don't they do it?
No, to be fair, it's the first time I've ever made that suggestion, but I've thought it for many, many years. That you consult.
But most fans would agree with you on that.
That you would consult with the fans, right? You sold sponsorships in every other area. Every other club's got a naming rights deal. Old Trafford is an iconic stadium and name.
And people call it anyway.
I love
the great stadiums.
I'll never change calling it Old Trafford. However, if we can actually, just for the sake of calling it, let's say it's called, you sponsor it for 80 million a year, Stan Collymore's Old Trafford.
I'm sure
I was going to think of a company's name then, but I thought, well, let's
the Jamie Carragher Arena.
The Jamie Carragher Arena. £80 million he subsidises Manchester United tickets for the next 10 years. It'd be wonderful. But think about that. 80 million a year, the impact, the whole of the Stretford end would be absolutely bouncing with hungry, raw individuals.
And they'd be able to take their kids.
Who'd be able to take their kids, who'd be able to basically drive that next generation of United fans, and be able to allow the communities of Stretford, of Hume, of Salford, of Broughton, of Odsall, to be able to get into Old Trafford for the price of a Costa coffee. I like Costa coffee, by the way. It's not Christmas me pricing.
There are other coffee brands available.
There are. Caffè Nero, Pret, and all the rest of them. Well, you go to a coffee shop now, 2 coffees and a little bit of a snack.
Yes,
it's 10 quid.
So
my view is, if you could basically somehow put that £80 million every single year, or 60 million, or 100 million, whatever it is that they get for it, into subsidised ticket prices for young people in a different type, a fan from a different demographic around Manchester and the Greater Manchester areas, and even internationally. It would be game changing. Manchester United should be pioneering. They should be the first into Europe.
Yep.
First manager to basically rotate his squad and put 4 striking. They've done pioneering things, Manchester United, over the last 50 to 100 years. And I think essentially now's the time to be global, but also be local, and make sure that you have the values and principles running through the club. And that means producing young players on the pitch, entertaining football, and do you know something? Winning is not just all about having a trophy. Yeah, of course we want trophies, of course we want to win the league, of course we don't want Liverpool ever to win a game of football, score a goal. But do you know something? We know we can't control all those things, because sometimes a team will come along that are so good, like City, and you've just got to sit back and wait.
And that's the beauty of competition.
Stan, they've watched us for 70 years,
yeah.
Manchester City. We can watch them for 3. Yeah. Not much more than 3. 4. We need to change it soon. But the reality is, Manchester United can do incredible things. And my view is, if you think about changing the game, affordability for fans to get in, allowing young people to be inspired by football is essential.
The Last Word with Stan Collymore.
So how did you enjoy the Gary Neville interview? Yes, of course you did. We're going to be doing the whole 45-minute sit-down as a bonus. Extra time on The Last Word with Stan Collymore on Friday, so that'll be dropping. So stick your notifications on your podcast. Doesn't matter which podcast you like or you subscribe to. Stick your notifications on. It pops up. It's ready. It drops. You listen to it. Absolutely fantastic. The big names, we're going to sit down with all of them. And the reason why player-to-player interaction is very good is because they're a lot more open, a lot more honest, and I think that you got that in the Gary Neville interview from him and from me. So do not forget, 45 minutes with Gary Neville on Friday. Keep your notifications on. It will tell you. It'll come up. The Last Word with Stan Collymore is ready, and listen at your leisure. Let's go into the second half of the Premier League review of the weekend, starting at Anfield. Liverpool against Arsenal, unbeaten in the last 8 now versus the Gunners, and it was very much men against boys, in my opinion. Never looked in doubt. I never swore on radio, and Howard Stern is one of my broadcasting heroes, works for Sirius XM in the United States. He earns £100 million over a 3-year contract. And he was called a shock jock because he swore and he was uncouth and what have you. And I'm not a massive fan of the swearing bit, although sometimes it's quite funny. So I choose my words carefully. I can swear. My producer, Chris, who's sitting just across, he said, "You can swear." I went, "Can I? Really?" And then I thought about it. I thought, well, I don't really need to swear to talk about football. So occasionally I will drop an F-bomb or a C-bomb, or it'll be bleeped out or what have you, because we want the younger audience as well. What's this got to do with Liverpool against Arsenal, you say? David Luiz, a fucking liability. That's why. The epitome of a player who wouldn't have been a pro 20 years ago because he'd have been bullied weekly. His post-match comments about, well, I pulled the shirt a little bit and it was a little bit like this. And he didn't defend properly for 2 Liverpool goals against the best attacking 3 in Europe. If you are not switched on against Salah, Mane and Firmino, you're going to get hurt. And every single criticism that I've put on social media and on this show about David Luiz came true in 90 minutes of football. Yes, you stick him in a 3, you have N'Golo Kante or Matic in front of you and he'll protect you. That's 5 players around him to protect 1 defender. Can he ping the ball 40 yards? Yeah, delicious, wonderful. But I would hope that my midfielders can do that and any other players that can do it in the back line are a bonus. But for a player to come with his, he's barely broke a sweat. He's in the post-match press conference, I don't know if it was with Jeff Shreves, and he's lackadaisical, doesn't really care, doesn't look hurt, doesn't look in pain to have lost, is exactly what Arsenal do not need right now. They need, do you remember Jamal Lascelles, I don't know if it was last season or the season before, came out after one of his early performances for Newcastle and said, I wasn't good enough, our team wasn't good enough, he was virtually crying, he was angry, he was upset. David Luiz, it's all right, I'll get showered and get changed and I'll see you in Carluccio's in a couple of hours, all right, guys? For a frappuccino. He's the epitome of what an Arsenal player is. And unfortunately for Arsenal, he's going to cost them on more than one occasion this season. So, Arsenal fans, when you tell me he was worth taking, no, he wasn't. Tyrone Mings cost Villa £20 million and everybody laughed. But he could defend, everybody knew that from a kid from Ipswich Town. He could defend. He then goes to Bournemouth, has a very bad injury. But people knew he could defend. It was just a case of could he come back and could he come back strong enough to be able to play again. He's been magnificent for Aston Villa as a central defender. Bjorn Engels come from Club Bruges. Why weren't Arsenal looking at him for the same kind of money? 6, 7, 10, 15, 20 million. Now, open the front door. There's David Luiz walking down the road. We're Arsenal, there's Chelsea. His agent's probably called us. He doesn't want to leave the area. Let's take him. He will cost you more than he will give you, Arsenal fans. An absolute shambles. In terms of Liverpool, fantastic. Of course, the European game, the European Super Cup to contend with. They were supposed to be edging players back very bit by bit. Players like Sadio Mane, that's been absolutely sensational. Hats off to him. The opposite again of David Luiz, a player that's come back from international duty, didn't want the extra rest, didn't want the extra break, and he's delivering already. 25 shots for Liverpool, 5 on target. That will disappoint them. 9 shots on target, so less than half for Arsenal, 3 on target. But it was men versus boys. Liverpool will, again, be the closest challengers to Manchester City. We pretty much know that. But for Arsenal, I don't think it's even against the Liverpool Mercurial 3 you've got to worry about if you're going to stick David Luiz in with if you're going to play him in a back 4. Jordan Ayew could do exactly what he did to Harry Maguire and Lindelof against Arsenal. Arsenal will win the vast majority of games, but I think they'll be incredibly disappointed with all Arsenal fans that deep down it was just too easy. Liverpool win that game. Bournemouth against Manchester City on the South Coast. This one had all been way too easy for this. This was one of the fixtures that I hated about the Premier League. That it was little club comes in, hello. Really happy to be here, thank you. We've only got 11,000 people in on a lovely sunny day in the South Coast and, we're all very happy to be here against a kind of well-drilled, well-organised Manchester City outfit, replete with world-class players. They do have the best squad. They do have the best team. I think that Liverpool on any given day could challenge them for that. But they'd won all 8 Premier League games going into this, so it wasn't a surprise so much that Manchester City won. But it was more really the fact that Bournemouth had more shots on target, 7-5. 7 shots on target from 10 shots. That's fantastic. That's one of the highest rates this year. Harry Wilson with a fantastic free kick. He's going to be a massive plus for them. And I do wonder, thinking ahead, Harvey Wilson, the young teenager that's gone to Liverpool. Harry Wilson. We've still got Trent Alexander-Arnold, that when those two guys hopefully go into the Liverpool team, Trent will be a veteran probably at 24, 25. So the future is very bright for Liverpool. But let's look at this City game. Better from the Cherries. I like Philip Billing and Lerma in midfield. Why? Bournemouth like to play. They like to play triangles. Manchester City liked, if you like. But the argument against them conceding lots and lots of goals in their Premier League tenure so far was that they didn't have steel to back it up. I watched the Villa game the other week where Bournemouth won. Harry Wilson again with a cracker. And Billing was excellent. He could have got sent off 2 or 3 times. But I thought he was genuinely very, very good. And I thought that both put in a real shift. They protected their back four very well. I think that Bournemouth soaked up pressure. And then when they broke with positivity, which would allude to the fact that they got 7 shots on target. There won't be many teams getting that many on target, by the way, this season. So when you're looking at last season and the seasons before, an aggregate score of 25 for Manchester City and 3 for Bournemouth, although it was 3-1 today, which upholds the kind of scoreline, I think that there were a lot more positives for Bournemouth to take into it. Now, David Silva, 400 games. I'm going to ask you a question. Answer it, please. Is he the best attacking midfielder in Premier League history? If we're talking attacking midfielders in Premier League history, you're talking, crikey, you'd be talking people like Robert Pires. You'd be talking about Gianfranco Zola. Would Eric Cantona now be classed as an attacking midfielder? I don't know. Rather than a striker. We've had so many players that have been able to sort of mix and match. I mean, technically, Sadio Mane and Mo Salah are attacking midfielders. They're not, I mean, they're generic forwards. I know what you're going to say, but they're not out-and-out strikers. I'm talking about people that create as much as they score. 400 games, rating him in the pantheon of Premier League greats. I think he comes in the bracket underneath Alan Shearer as the all-time goal scorer, comes underneath Thierry Henry as arguably the greatest player, comes underneath Cristiano Ronaldo that had a significant impact, comes underneath Wayne Rooney, but only just for me in that group of players. Had little injuries, little niggly injuries in recent seasons, but been pivotal in all of the success. So congratulations to David Silva, 400 games. Not quite for me in that ultra greats list, but certainly if they are A+, we're talking about Henry and Shearer and Cantona, we're talking about a very solid A for David Silva. Manchester City just keep on trucking. I know it was disappointing for them last week against Tottenham Hotspur, but Raheem Sterling gets on the score sheet. Sergio Aguero, will he get a golden boot? We didn't learn much about them, what we didn't already know. That they've got a fantastically deep squad. Rodri comes on to settle things down in the second half for Gundogan. No real negatives. The positives were that what we know is that a great consistency of performance. But actually, I thought that Bournemouth, the real progress in this match this season was Bournemouth. The way that they've added steel to the substance, and hopefully it'll be a more steely Bournemouth to ally with the undoubted quality that they've got. Let's go into the last couple of games of the weekend. Spurs versus Newcastle, a shock on the cards at White Hart Lane. We've talked about Harry Kane and the penalty that wasn't given. I think it was absolutely spot on, as I've said. I think the referee got the David Silva one right at Bournemouth, and I think he got the Harry Kane one right, referring it over to VAR. They'd won their last 4 versus Newcastle United, but Newcastle United now 22 wins in the Premier League era against Spurs. That's only been equalled with the same amount of wins against Aston Villa. So Newcastle, we shouldn't be too surprised. They've got a very good record overall against Tottenham Hotspur. Spurs, let's discuss. They've conceded first in the last 3 games. I saw against Villa, a little bit stodgy. I was at the White Hart Lane for that game. A little bit stodgy. Little bit defensively naive. One ball over the top from Tyrone Mings. John McGinn scampers in behind Davinson Sanchez. I'll come to him very shortly. And finishes. The defending for the Joel Linton goal is as bad as you'll see. Picture in your mind's eye Christian Atsu. If you've seen the goal, you'll know. Christian Atsu sort of breaks, comes in 10 yards off the left flank, not far off being level with the 18-yard box. And I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds in the studio in Malaysia, analysing the game. Christian Atsu had 5 seconds to receive the ball, to pick his head up, to have a look, and then dink the ball over the top. Firstly, that means very poor pressure from Kyle Walker-Peters and the right-sided central defender, and also the defensive midfielders from Spurs. So are they fit enough? Are they sharp enough at the moment? That's a valid question. You don't give 5 seconds anybody in the Premier League. Anybody will hurt you given 5 seconds. So then he's lifted his head up, and if you look at Davinson Sanchez's positioning, Davinson Sanchez was done for the Villa goal. So this is where the criticism of their central defender is, and why, the situation with Vertonghen is important. Vertonghen and Alderweireld have a great relationship, a great partnership, clean sheets. Not so much with Davinson Sanchez in the team. Is that Davinson Sanchez is looking at Christian Atsu. So imagine I'm Joe Linton. I'm on the edge of the box, and I'm looking as to where Christian Atsu is going to dink the ball from my left-hand side. In striking school, you are told that once you see a central defender's number, I saw Davinson Sanchez's number 6. Clearly, just his back. If I'm Joe Linton, you've got him. Game over, done, dusted. Good night, nurse. Why? Because Sanchez cannot know now, as Atsu is about to dink that ball over the top, where Joe Linton, his striker, is. So what do? What do people, when you see John Terry or Rio Ferdinand doing punditry, they say, what you do is you stand, if you're Davinson Sanchez, side on. You are looking to your right, out of your right eye towards Christian Atsu, the kicker, and you are looking to your left to Joe Linton, having him in the corner of your eye to at least be able to know where he is and potentially affect, do I go with him, do I stay, what do I do? Davinson Sanchez was square on looking at Christian Atsu. And as a striker, and we had the full 360-degree pano camera, that Joe Linton saw a big shiny number 6 on the back of the Newcastle central defender, and he just went, please God, let this ball go over his head, and I am in. And that's what happened. Ball went over. He took a great first touch away from Danny Rose that was desperately trying to get back into the box, and dispatches a lovely finish. I thought that Almiron, Joe Linton, Longstaff, Lascelles were all excellent, which begs the question, if Newcastle was so good this week, why were they so poor last week? I just wonder if Steve Bruce has got in the dressing room and said, lads, I may get the sack, I may not get the sack, who knows? But you're playing for your careers, you're playing for a great club. Just go and put some pride into the shirt. Newcastle did that. If they play like that, they should be looking at 10th, 11th, 12th. If they play like they did at Norwich, welcome to the drop zone. Christian Eriksen, we don't know what's going to happen. I thought that when he came on, I thought the body language between him and Poch was awful. But Spurs need work. They need to get Eriksen sorted. They need to get Vertonghen sorted. They need some clarity of the situation with Poch. For me, I'd give him a 5-year contract tomorrow and absolute control over the buying and selling at the club. That obviously frustrates him. But in the short term, Spurs are going nowhere fast. And finally, Wolves against Burnley. Won the last top floor 4 flight games versus the Clarets. It's the reprise of the 1987-88 Sherpa Van final. 80,000 at Wembley between two clubs. I think they were both in the 4th division in those days. Euro hangover, I've got question mark in my comments and quotes. Yes, to a degree. 3 draws for Wolves now. Which is going to crack first, the Premier League or the European form? They played Torino in the week. They played 6 of the team that won in Turin. Rui Patricio, the goalkeeper, João Moutinho, legs aren't getting any younger. Jota, Jimenez, the 2 front men, Conor Cody and Bolly, 2 of the central defenders. It makes a difference. Travel to Turin, train, get up for a really big game. 3,000 Wolves fans following you to a proper football club in Torino. Come back. You've got the high of that. You then dip naturally a couple of days after training, feeling a little bit, crikey, you've got to raise ourselves. Who are we playing? Is it United at Old Trafford? Is it Liverpool? It's Burnley at home. They're going to outwork us. They're going to graft. They're going to grind. Ashley Barnes has scored. Only Sergio Aguero and Sadio Mane have scored more. So it's going to be difficult for us. And they found it difficult. Scored a very late penalty, but crucially, the sign of a good time is not to lose. They scored that penalty very late on. I think that Wolves could just about manage to be the best of the rest and have a really good European run. But it's going to be touch and go. There's no doubt about it at all that 3 draws in their opening games. Wolves, yes, if your glasses are full, they're unbeaten. If your glasses are empty, they haven't won a game yet. But I think it will slightly concern Nuno Espirito Santo, that he's had to play 6 of his big hitters. He'll be glad that the international break comes up, but then he won't, because a lot of these guys are going to go off and join their international group. How will Wolves do this season? I'm still going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm still going to say best of the rest in the Premier League, and can go all the way to the final at the very least. Semi-final, quarter-final, easily for Wolves with the quality that they've got. But will it come at the price of a Premier League place or two? It remains to be seen. Next, the stats with Stan.
Now on the last word with Stan Collymore, Stan's stats.
Right, let's have a look through the stats this weekend. It doesn't mean everything, but it could allude to something for your club during the season. Only 2 home wins, Villa and Liverpool. Very interesting. Most goals scored, Chelsea, West Ham, Liverpool and City, scoring 3 apiece. I suppose the most interesting one there is West Ham. You'd expect City to score 3, you'd expect Liverpool to score 3, you'd perhaps even expect Chelsea to score 3, but West Ham going through the gears after a couple of difficult and disappointing performances in their opening games. Most shots in a game, shout it out, people. It was Liverpool, 25 shots in the game against the Gunners. Least shots in a game, Norwich City with 6. Slightly concerning for a team that apparently, if you're according to Norwich City fans, are going to outscore people this season. They don't worry so much about defending in Norwich, but they're going to outscore people. The least shots in a game this week. Most shots on target, West Ham United with 10. If you get into double figures with shots on target, you're flying. You're cooking on gas. That's the most I think I've seen in the stats this season. 10 shots on target, West Ham. Credit to you. We give credit where it's due. And if you're poor, we give it out as well. Least shots on target, Everton, 1 at Aston Villa. Slightly disappointing from the Toffees on an away day. Most completed passes. You're going to say Pep, Barcelona, Bayern Munich, Manchester City. No, Tottenham Hotspur, 689 completed passes. It wasn't enough to pass their way to goal, though, against Newcastle United. And the most tackles. Go on, you want to say Burnley. You want to say Palace. You want to say Villa. Liverpool. Apparently, top quality teams don't tackle. Yes, they do. Liverpool with 39. That's your stats from Stan.
The last word with Stan Collymore.
And finally, on the last word with Stan Collymore on this Tuesday, the news with Stan. Right, this is where we have a look at the news. It's usually Hugh Wizzy or Sammy Miller. They're not here today, so it's down to me. And I like picking out stories. Story number 1, the Bury situation. And you could throw Bolton into that as well. By the time today that you be getting this podcast around tea time, we get it turned round, it gets recorded in the morning. I'm in London, I'm at Canary Wharf, it's a beautiful sunny day, and then I head back north to Cannock afterwards. But by the time this comes out, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, Bolton may not be anymore. One of the founding fathers of English football, one of the founders of the Football League. I think it's an absolute disgrace what's happened. And unfortunately, you listening to this and I are equally as culpable. We all get very giddy when a very wealthy owner or somebody that pretends to have money comes into our football club and says, we're going to make you the next Manchester City. We don't do enough due diligence as fans to say, no, this guy has come from this country or from these shores, has a very dodgy record. We don't want them near our football club, and we're actually not going to let them in from day one. We let them in, we tweet them telling them how great they are and this, that and the other, and then the collateral damage means that a certain percentage of clubs have absolute rotters. Throw in Bury, throw in Bolton, and you have a situation whereby clubs that are 130, 140 years old may not exist by the end of today, may not exist by the time you hear my voice. So we all need to be careful what we wish for. Aston Villa have had several owners that I just think have just been ranked bad. Randy Lerner, Tony Gier. We've got 2 owners now that you don't hear of very often. But I'm very sceptical. I go into them saying, you have to prove to me, rather than going on Twitter, following on Twitter and saying, oh, you're great, we love you so much, thank you very much, waving stars and stripes or Chinese flags in the Holt End. It can end in disaster. Let's hope it doesn't for Bury or for Bolton Wanderers. Now, Ian Holloway, who I love, I've played against, I've worked with, and I know very, very well, but his IFAB ignorance. IFAB is the International Football Association Board. It is made up of the 4 home unions, Northern Ireland, England, Wales and Scotland. and FIFA. FIFA have 4 votes. That's the rest of the world. 209 associations have 4 votes. The home nations have 4 votes. So you need to have 75% of that vote to change a law. They make the laws, the IFAB, the home nations and FIFA. So FIFA want to bring in where you must wear a bandana into football, and FIFA use all of their 4 votes. They still need 2 votes from the home nations to pass. Likewise, the 4 home nations could pass. We want VAR to be used every 3 seconds during a game. FIFA could block that. Ian Holloway went on television and said, these foreigners making the rules, it's, Brexit and da-da-da, and it was ridiculous. And this is the ignorance of a lot of pundits and a lot of sports football journalists, unfortunately, is that a lot don't know the rules. There is an IFAB app. I tell you to go and download it. It gives you all the laws and rules of the game. So when you next week have your club that is affected by Rule 4 subsection B, you can actually see what it says. But what Ian Holloway basically alluded to was the ignorance of what I suggest a lot of football people have. They don't understand the rules. Foreigners making the rules, da-da-da-da-da. We have more rule-making power and control because of our historic place in the game than any other nation on the planet. Plus, if you add David Ellery, a former Premier League and FIFA referee, who's the technical director at IFAB, he has more clout and more say than any other human on the planet when it comes to suggesting laws and rules. He's English. He was the headmaster at Harrow. So, Ian, I love you, pal, but you could not get more English than David Ellery. You could not get more British control over laws than having 4 votes for 4 nations as opposed to 4 votes for 209 nations. Give your head a little wobble. Twitter storm, Twitter racism. Top 50 black players apparently are being watched, monitored, no less, by Twitter. Absolute cobblers. What happens to player number 51 or 52 on that list? Do we just forget about them? What about ex-players like me that have been racially abused a number of times over the years and had to go to the police and had people nicked and arrested and charged and convicted? Twitter, sort it out. I love you. I was the first ex or current pro to use that platform in 2007. And I used it because I wanted to ask you listening questions on radio shows. What do you think about the game? What are your opinions about the game? Because all I'd heard before that was people preaching, this is what you should think, this is what you should know. And then lots of players, lots of ex-players joined on and have been fantastic using the platform. But if we cannot in 2019, and I completely agree with Harry Maguire on this, I suggested an algorithm, and I know Twitter have consulted me a couple of times and said, what do you think? And it's like things like the mute button as opposed to block. Block is seen as aggressive. There were studies carried out that if you block somebody, that makes that person more likely to want to contact you and abuse you, or open a new account to do so. So muting, you can say whatever you like to me today, Joe Blogs 23 on Twitter, but if I mute you, I can't see it. I would rather 2 things happen. Verification, and Harry Maguire nailed it, passport, driving licence, credit card, for an account. That makes it much, much more difficult. That also deals with a lot of the trolling, opening fake accounts, opening a number of accounts, troll farms, because you have to have verifiable passport details or credit card details or driving licence details or national identity card details. And we start to have a bit of common sense. I just think that in the grand scheme of things, when you have a Donald Trump on Twitter saying outrageous things, when you have lots of other people on Twitter saying outrageous things, that keeps people talking, it keeps people advertising on Twitter, driving numbers. And I think that unfortunately racism is a tool that people use that gets people talking like us now. So I don't think Twitter will do anything about it. That's the news for this week with me, Stanley Victor Collymore. Do not forget that the Gary Neville interview in full will be on Friday as an extra time Last Word with Stan Collymore drop. The whole interview is fantastic. I know you've enjoyed. I think that in the first hour that I put just a 30 to 60 second clip on Twitter last night, 150,000 people had watched that clip within the first hour. Absolutely fantastic. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. I've got a big name that's going to join me, hopefully, in the next month. We're going to decamp from London up to Cottonopolis, or in that kind of area, Manchester. I want to keep presenters, co-presenters, announcers, all changing, fresh voices. Occasionally it'll just be me flying solo. Occasionally it'll be three of us. Sometimes it'll be two of us. Sometimes it'll just be one long, really good interview with a legend. If you've got any people that you'd like to see interviewed that interest you in football, whether they be ex-players, whether they be ex-coaches, they just need to be interested. I'd rather have a second, third tier player or an ex-coach that has really something interesting to say, a great story, than a superstar that's going to sit there and say, yeah, no. So tweet me at Stan Collymore with your thoughts and opinions, and want your feedback as always on iTunes, on Acast, on Spotify, on Google Podcasts. Leave your thoughts moving forward. You've been listening to The Last Word with Stan Collymore. Bye-bye, till next week.
The Last Word with Stan Collymore.
Banisters are a big problem with all those nooks and crannies. Not anymore with Peel Tech. Just spray it on and brush it off. Gone. Years of old paint removed. Garden gates and furniture can be a nightmare to strip back. It can take hours of labour as well. Peel Tech does it in a matter of minutes. Now you're free to watch the footy again.